For 7 years, my love for my best friend's uncle was a secret I held close. So when she casually mentioned she'd just been to her uncle's engagement party, the world stopped. I heard myself ask, my voice a hollow whisper, "How many uncles do you have?" Some people enter your life like the first gentle rain on the high plains of Oregon, soft, clear, and so quiet you believe they'll stay forever. And some secrets lie buried for so long under the weight of time that when the truth finally breaks through, the sharpest pain isn't the betrayal itself, but the realization that you never truly knew the people who were always by your side. My name is Dr. Evelyn Reed, and I'm 28 years old. If you were to ask what I'm most proud of, I wouldn't hesitate to say it's my work. I am the youngest team lead at a biotechnology research center in Portland, Oregon. My days are a revolving door of the lab, state-of-the-art equipment, dense reports, and the window in my office, which, in season, is perpetually framed by the deep purple of hydrangea blooms. It's a monotonous life, perhaps, but it brings me peace, a quiet satisfaction in living the passion I chose for myself. People often say I'm too rational, that I weigh everything with logic instead of emotion. I just smile whenever I hear those comments, because only I know that the more rational a person appears, the more completely they can lose their heart when they fall in love. Perhaps because I was so used to controlling every variable in my work, when my heart began to stir, I had no idea how to hold anything back for myself. That morning, Portland was engulfed in a massive downpour. Raindrops hammered relentlessly against the glass of my office window, painting the entire world in the cool gray palette so characteristic of the city. I had just put the final touches on a report after a long string of late nights when my phone vibrated softly on the desk. It was Chloe. Her voice, as always, was effervescent. "Eva, are you busy tonight?" I glanced at the stack of unfinished paperwork and replied, "I still have to edit this report." Chloe immediately launched into her plea. "It's just a small get-together, a belated birthday thing for me. Please come?" I hesitated. Honestly, after a full week of nonstop work, all I wanted was to go back to my small apartment, brew a cup of hot tea, and sleep for a very long time. But hearing the excitement in Chloe's voice, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. We'd known each other since our freshman year of college, a friendship that had just passed the 8-year mark. Chloe was vibrant and outgoing, a lover of crowded, lively places, while I was an introvert who cherished quiet moments. Everyone always said we were complete opposites, yet we had remained inseparable all these years. We were so close that I once believed no secrets could ever exist between us. At least, that's what I believed then. That evening, the rain had softened to a drizzle. The cafe was perched on a high hill, offering a view of the entire city of Portland glittering with golden lights below. The post-rain air carried the pleasant scent of pine and damp earth. The moment she saw me walk in, Chloe ran over and wrapped me in a tight hug. "You're always so punctual." I smiled faintly. "I don't like to keep people waiting." "You're such a good girl." We both laughed. Just then, the sound of a car engine echoed from the front of the cafe. A black SUV pulled to a smooth stop at the entrance. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He wore a dark blue dress shirt, the sleeves neatly rolled up to his forearms. He was tall, with a calm demeanor, and a face that held a rare, steady maturity. But it wasn't his appearance that made me freeze. It was his eyes. A strange feeling crept into my heart, as if I had seen that gaze somewhere before, a long, long time ago, though I couldn't remember where. Chloe quickly pulled me over. "This is Julian." Then she turned to him. "And this is Evelyn, the friend I'm always telling you about." He gave a slight nod, his calm eyes meeting mine, and then offered a very faint smile. "Hello." His voice was deep, warm, and surprisingly gentle. I smiled back. "Hi." Throughout dinner, he said very little, spending most of the time quietly listening to Chloe's endless stream of stories about everything under the sun. Occasionally, he would turn to me and ask a few questions about my research. When he learned about the high intensity of my lab work, he asked softly, "Your job must be incredibly stressful." I smiled. "You get used to it." He asked again, "Have you ever thought about quitting?" I shook my head, almost instantly. "Never." He looked at me for a long moment before speaking slowly. "I admire people who know exactly what they want." It was just a simple, ordinary sentence, but for some reason, I felt my cheeks flush. It had probably been a very long time since a compliment had left me so flustered. By the time the party ended, the sky had unexpectedly opened up again. A colleague with an urgent matter pulled Chloe away, leaving me standing alone under the awning, fumbling with my phone to call a ride. Just as I opened the app, the screen went black. The battery was dead. I let out a soft, helpless sigh when Julian's voice sounded right beside me. "It's on my way. Let me give you a ride home." I shook my head, embarrassed. "I wouldn't want to trouble you." He just smiled. "It's no trouble." After a few seconds of hesitation, I nodded in agreement. The inside of the car was very quiet. The steady rhythm of the rain against the windows blended with a soft piano melody playing at a low volume, creating a surprisingly comfortable atmosphere. We didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't awkward. When we were just a few hundred yards from my apartment complex, a motorcycle suddenly shot out in front of us, forcing him to brake hard. My body lurched forward on instinct, and immediately, a hand shot out to brace my shoulder, holding me back. The movement was swift, as natural as a reflex. He turned to me, his expression worried. "Are you okay?" I shook my head. "I'm fine." He let out a soft breath. "Sorry about that." I laughed. "It wasn't your fault." That was the first time I saw him truly smile. It wasn't a dazzling smile, but it was enough to make his usually composed face radiate a deep warmth. The car stopped at the entrance to my building. I opened the door, got out, and turned back to thank him. Chloe is lucky to have such a great brother. Hearing that, he was silent for a few seconds before saying quietly, "I'm not her brother." I was a little surprised. "Oh?" "I'm the son of her mother's best friend. Our families have been close for a long time, so we've always seen each other as family." I nodded slowly. Strangely, knowing that brought a sense of relief I couldn't quite explain. Just as I was about to turn and leave, he called my name. "Evelyn." I turned back to look at him. "Yes?" He glanced up at the still raining sky and smiled. "The rain is supposed to be heavy again tomorrow. Don't forget an umbrella." It was just an ordinary, simple reminder, like any other everyday phrase. Yet, for some reason, that sentence echoed in my mind all night long. 3 months later, the research institute where I worked officially received a massive investment from a leading national biotechnology corporation. The entire staff was summoned to the auditorium for the partnership signing ceremony. As our director stepped onto the stage and smilingly introduced the institute's new strategic partner, the room erupted in applause. The moment the man walked out from behind the stage wing, I was completely stunned. It was Julian Thorne. But this time, he wasn't in the simple dress shirt from our first meeting. He was wearing a finely tailored gray suit, exuding the poised, commanding presence of a corporate leader. The director formally announced, "Please join me in welcoming the chairman of the board of Thorne Dynamics, our new strategic partner." Whispers immediately spread throughout the auditorium, but all I could do was stand there, staring at him in utter astonishment. It was only then that I realized the man who had quietly driven me home in the rain was one of the most renowned entrepreneurs in the high-tech agriculture sector. After the ceremony, as I was walking down the hallway carrying a stack of documents, an employee rushing past accidentally bumped into my shoulder, sending all the papers scattering across the floor. I quickly bent down to pick them up, but another hand reached down to help me at the same time. It was him. He calmly knelt, gathered the papers, and handed them back to me. "Let me." I smiled and shook my head. "It's okay, I've got it." He looked at me with a slightly exasperated expression. "You always insist on carrying everything yourself." I just smiled in response. As he handed back the last file, his expression suddenly turned serious. "Evelyn." "Yes?" He looked directly into my eyes, seeming to consider his words carefully before speaking. "If anything happens in the future, don't be so quick to believe what you see." I was bewildered. "What do you mean?" But before he could explain, his phone rang. His assistant quickly approached and whispered something that made his expression change instantly. He looked at me one more time, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Excuse me, I have to go." With that, he turned and left. I could only stand and watch as his car disappeared behind the row of green pines outside the institute's gate. All the way back to my office, his words echoed in my head like a cryptic warning. Don't be so quick to believe what you see. At the time, I had no idea that just 3 days later, a research data leak worth millions of dollars would rock the entire institute. And the most terrifying part was that every piece of evidence subsequently collected would point to one person: me. I barely slept that night. Julian Thorne's words kept replaying in my mind, like a broken record stuck in a moment of silence. If anything happens in the future, don't be so quick to believe what you see. Back then, I thought it was just a casual remark from an experienced man, but the later it got, the stronger the feeling grew that he knew something I didn't. Outside my window, the Portland rain fell steadily, streaks of water running down the glass like someone trying to erase a freshly painted picture. The next morning, I arrived at the institute earlier than usual. The normally quiet hallways were filled with security guards in uniform and several unfamiliar faces. The atmosphere was so heavy that even the sound of footsteps seemed hesitant. I had just put my bag down when Helen, the head of administration, hurried over to me. "Evelyn, the director wants to see you in the conference room." Now. I was a bit surprised. "What's wrong?" Helen just shook her head. "I don't know. Just go." A nameless sense of dread began to rise within me. The conference room door opened. The institute's director sat at the head of the table, flanked by the head of legal, the head of IT, and 3 men in suits I had never seen before. On the large screen was the interface of the institute's internal data system. "Evelyn, have a seat." The director's voice was unnervingly calm. I pulled out a chair and sat down. A man with glasses pushed a file toward me. "These are the system access logs." I looked at the dense columns of numbers. He continued, "Early this morning, the entire research data for Project Evergreen was illegally copied." I flinched. Project Evergreen was the project I had been personally leading for nearly a year. It was also the key project funded by Thorne Dynamics. The man opened another image. The login account address displayed on the screen read, "User Evelyn Reed." I was stunned. "That's impossible." He looked directly at me. "According to the system, your account logged in at 2:17 a.m. But I was at home then." "Do you have proof?" I froze. "I live alone. No one can verify where I was." The director sighed softly. "Evelyn, I've known you for years. You've always been a diligent worker. You really didn't do this?" "We hope so," the man said, placing a USB drive on the table. "But security also found this in your desk drawer." I picked it up. "This isn't my USB drive. I've never seen it before." No one said anything. The silence in that room was more terrifying than any accusation. After nearly an hour, the board decided to temporarily suspend me to facilitate the investigation. I walked out of the conference room under the scrutinizing gazes of my colleagues. Some looked at me with pity, some with suspicion, and some immediately turned away when our eyes met. I had never felt such a vast distance between myself and the people I worked with every day. My phone buzzed continuously in my pocket. It was Chloe. I answered. "Eva, where are you?" "I'm still at the institute." "Is the rumor on the internal forum true?" I closed my eyes. "Someone stole the data. And they suspect you?" "I'm the primary suspect." The other end of the line was silent for a few seconds. "I believe you." Just those 3 simple words made my nose sting. "Thank you." "Stay right there, I'm coming over." "Don't. Not right now." "Why?" "I just want to be alone." I hung up. It wasn't that I didn't need a friend, but at that moment, I didn't even know who I could trust. Just as I stepped out of the institute's main gate, a black car pulled up. Julian Thorne got out. He was wearing a white dress shirt, the collar still slightly askew as if he had just rushed from a meeting. The moment he saw me, he walked over quickly. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "You heard? The whole company knows." He studied my pale face for a long time before asking softly, "Did you take the data?" I looked him straight in the eye. "You suspect me too?" He didn't answer right away. After a moment, he slowly shook his head. "No." "Why?" "Because if it were you," he smiled faintly, "you would never do it in such a stupid way." I burst into laughter, tears streaming down my face. That was probably the most comforting thing I had heard all day. He handed me a bottle of water. "You haven't eaten anything since this morning, have you?" I was surprised. "How did you know?" "It's written all over your face." I took the water bottle, my hand so cold I nearly dropped it. He gently gripped my wrist. "Evelyn." "Yes?" "I'll help you." "Why?" "Because I trust you." I froze. His gaze was perfectly calm, devoid of pity or condescension. It was a firm, unwavering belief that made you want to lean on it. Just then, a woman's voice called out from behind us. "Julian!" We both turned. A woman in a cream-colored suit stepped out of another car. She was around 30, with a sharp, intelligent air. Her eyes flickered from me to Julian's hand, still holding my wrist, and her lips tightened slightly. "You got here first?" Julian immediately let go of my hand. "Isabel, you made it." The woman nodded. "I just flew in from DC. Then she turned to me, offering a polite smile. "Hello, I'm Isabel Vance, head of legal for Thorne Dynamics." I replied quietly, "Hello." Isabel's eyes lingered on me for a few more seconds before she spoke to Julian in a low voice, though I could still hear her clearly. "The emergency board meeting starts in 10 minutes. "Understood." He turned back to me. "Go home and get some rest. I'll call you tonight." I nodded. Their car slowly disappeared down the hill. I stood alone in front of the Research Institute, a question suddenly forming in my mind. If Julian Thorne believed in me so completely, then who was the person trying to frame me? And what did they really want? Was it the research data, or was it their intention to bring him down with me? I got back to my apartment as dusk settled, my body aching with a fatigue that felt like I'd just survived a battle without even knowing why I was the target. The moment I opened the door, my phone rang. The screen displayed Julian Thorne's name. I took a deep breath before answering. "I'm downstairs." I paused for a second. "Give me 5 minutes." I quickly threw on a light jacket and went down to the lobby. The black car was parked in the same spot. He was leaning against the door, holding a thick file. As soon as he saw me, he opened the passenger door. "Get in. It's not convenient to talk out here." I got in, and as the door closed, the space immediately became quiet. He didn't start the car right away but handed the file to me. "Take a look." I opened it. Inside was a complete copy of the system access logs the board had shown me that morning, but this version was covered in red pen markings. "Where did you get this?" "Our corporate cybersecurity division." I looked at him, surprised. "They gave it to you?" "I'm responsible for this investment. If the project is compromised, I have the right to access the records." I looked down and read more closely. After just a few minutes, I noticed something very strange. "This isn't right." He turned to me. "You see it too." I nodded. According to the logs, my account logged in at 2:17 a.m., but just 2 minutes later, it had downloaded nearly 2 terabytes of data. "That transfer speed is impossible." His eyes lit up with satisfaction. "Exactly." I looked up. Not even the Institute's internal network can transfer data that fast. That's why I believe someone altered the access logs. My heart beat faster, which means someone with a deep understanding of the system. I fell silent. If that were true, the person didn't just want to steal the research. They wanted to deliberately frame me. It was a meticulously planned setup. He opened another document. "This is the security camera footage from the research floor." I watched intently as a figure in a white lab coat appeared a little after 2 a.m. The person wore a hat and a mask, their head bowed low, making it easy for anyone to assume it was me. The height was similar, the hairstyle identical, even the way they walked was eerily familiar. A chill ran down my spine. "This person." He nodded. "It's intentional." I stared at each frame, and just as the figure reached the lab door and paused for about 3 seconds before swiping their keycard, I froze. "Stop there." He paused the video. I pointed at the screen. "The hand." "What about it?" "This person is using their left hand to swipe the card." He followed my gaze. "You're right." I took a deep breath, but I'm right-handed. I've always held my keycard in my right hand. Julian immediately took out his phone and called someone. "Leo, cross-reference all the video feeds. Zoom in on the suspect's hand movements." "Yes, right now." He hung up and looked at me. This detail is crucial. A small flicker of hope ignited within me. At least I wasn't completely cornered. Just then, his phone rang again. After listening for a few moments, his face grew stern. "Understood, I'm on my way." He turned to me. "I have to go back to the office." "What happened?" "A rival company just announced a product with technology almost identical to Project Evergreen." I was speechless. "So quickly?" "Very quickly." He looked directly into my eyes. "This proves the data wasn't stolen yesterday. They've been planning this for a while. I suddenly remembered his words from a few days ago. If anything happens in the future, it turned out he had sensed the danger long before. The car stopped in front of my apartment building. I had just opened the door to get out when my phone rang. It was Chloe. Her voice was unusually urgent. "Eva, where are you? I just got home. Don't go upstairs." My heart tightened. "What's wrong?" "Someone just went into your apartment." I froze. "How do you know?" "I came by to check on you and saw the door was slightly ajar. I thought you were home and called out, but no one answered. Then I saw a man in a black coat leaving your apartment and taking the stairs. The blood in my veins turned to ice." "Did you call security?" "I did, but by the time they got there, he was gone." Julian, who had overheard the conversation, got out of the car. "What is it?" I quickly explained, and he said immediately, "Let's go check." We rushed upstairs. There were no signs of forced entry on the door. Everything in the living room was untouched, but when I stepped into my office, I instantly saw that the bookshelf had been moved. Someone had searched the room thoroughly. The desk drawers were open, but my laptop was still there, and my wallet was untouched. Nothing of value had been taken. Clearly, the intruder wasn't after money. With a trembling hand, I opened the bottom drawer, where I kept a small wooden box containing all the handwritten research notebooks from the past 3 years. The box was still there, but when I lifted the lid, my heart sank. All the notebooks were gone. Julian's hands clenched into fists. "They're erasing every way you have to prove your innocence." I stood frozen in the middle of my familiar office, for the first time feeling like I was facing an opponent who was not only intelligent but was always one step ahead of me. And what chilled me to the bone was the realization that this person seemed to know every habit, every secret of my life. I stood motionless before the empty wooden box, my hands clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. A single question echoed in my mind. How did they know exactly where I kept those notebooks? Not even my closest colleagues at the Institute knew I had a habit of writing my notes by hand. From the day I started on Project Evergreen, I had maintained a strict principle. Every important idea had to be recorded in a notebook before being entered into the computer, both for cross-referencing and as a backup in case of a system failure. I had never told anyone about this. Julian scanned the room and then walked slowly to the displaced bookshelf. He bent down, observing it for a long moment, then took a pair of thin gloves from his pocket and carefully picked up a single blue thread caught on the edge of a table leg. "What are you doing?" I asked, surprised. He placed the thread into a small evidence bag and replied calmly, "If the person was careful enough not to leave fingerprints, they might have still left something else behind." I watched his practiced movements. "Did you study criminology?" A faint smile touched his lips. "No, just years of being in business. Sometimes you have to learn to see the details others miss." Just then, there was a knock on the door. 2 building security guards and a local police officer entered, having been alerted to the break-in. They quickly filed a report, took photos of the scene, and asked me a series of questions. When the officer asked if I suspected anyone, I was about to shake my head, but Julian gave me a subtle look, as if reminding me to think carefully. I remained silent for a few seconds before answering, "I don't have enough evidence to suspect anyone at the moment." The officer nodded, jotted down a few more notes, and told me to report anything else I remembered. Nearly an hour later, everyone had left. The apartment returned to its familiar quiet, but the sense of peace was completely gone. I sank onto the sofa, my head in my hands. "Julian." "Yes. I feel like I'm being watched." He didn't answer right away. After a moment, he said very quietly, "It's not a feeling. You are." My heart skipped a beat. He pulled a chair to face me and placed his phone on the table. The screen displayed a timeline of all the events of the past 3 days. "Look, from your suspension to the break-in at your apartment, it's been less than 10 hours. That proves the other party knows your schedule very well." I bit my lip. It's someone from the Institute. Or someone very close to me. That thought brought to mind the faces I saw every day. Helen, who always treated me like a younger sister. David from IT, who often helped me fix my computer. The junior researchers on my team who looked up to me. If there truly was a traitor among them, who could it be? Just then, my phone rang. A blocked number. I hesitated for a second, then answered. The other end was completely silent. except for the faint sound of breathing. "Hello?" No one replied. I was about to hang up when a voice, distorted by a voice changer, came through. "Stop digging." I immediately put the call on speaker. Julian gave me a signal to stay calm. The person let out a cold laugh. "You never should have gotten involved with Project Evergreen." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Who is this?" "Someone who's giving you a chance. And if I don't stop?" The line went silent for a few seconds. Then the voice replied, enunciating each word slowly. "Next time, it won't be just notebooks you lose." The call ended, plunging the room into silence. I could feel a cold sweat on my back. Julian immediately called his assistant. "Leo, trace the number that just called. Use every resource you have." He had just hung up when my phone buzzed with a new text message. It was a single photo. I opened it, and my breath caught in my throat. The picture was of my mother, watering plants in front of her small house in the suburbs of Portland. The photo was taken from a close distance, clearly captured that same day. Below it was a single line of text. "Older people are so prone to accidents." I was shaking so badly the phone almost slipped from my hand. Julian immediately took it, looked at the message, and shot to his feet. "I'm taking you to your mother's house." Now, we practically ran to the parking garage. On the way, I kept calling my mom, but there was no answer. With every unanswered ring, my heart pounded harder. I had never been so terrified. Throughout the 30-minute drive, my mind was filled with every horrifying possibility. The moment the car stopped, I threw the door open and ran. "Mom!" The wooden door opened quickly. My mother stood there, a dish towel still in her hand. Seeing my frantic state, she was startled. "What's wrong, honey?" I threw my arms around her. Only when I felt her familiar warmth did I realize how scared I had been. My mom gently rubbed my back. "What happened? You're as pale as a ghost." I wanted to tell her, but I swallowed the words. I didn't want her to live in fear. Julian walked in and bowed his head respectfully. "Good evening, Mrs. Reed." My mom looked at him, then back at me. "A friend of yours?" I nodded slightly. "Yes. My mom invited us in. While she was in the kitchen making tea, Julian whispered, 'I'll have someone watch over your mother starting today.'" I shook my head. "Won't that be a bother?" "No." He looked at me seriously. "I'm not going to let you lose anyone else." His words made my heart flutter, but before I could respond, his gaze suddenly shifted to the window behind me. His normally calm expression changed. He shot up from his seat and dashed out into the yard. My mother and I, startled, ran after him. About 30 yards from the fence, a figure in a black jacket jumped onto a motorcycle and sped away. Julian gave chase for a few steps but couldn't catch him. The person vanished around a bend in seconds. When he returned, he was holding something he had found on the ground. It was an employee ID card for the Cascade Bioresearch Institute. I recognized the face on the card immediately. My entire body went rigid. The person in the photo was David Chen, the systems administration engineer who had been so helpful to me for the past 3 years. The employee ID card in Julian Thorne's hand seemed to tremble with the rhythm of my own breathing. I stared at the face on the card, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. David Chen, the Institute's system administrator. He was about 7 years older than me, with a calm and reserved demeanor, and had been working there for nearly 10 years. When I first joined the Institute, he was the one who patiently guided me through the data systems, explaining every security protocol and access level. He had even stayed late countless nights to troubleshoot issues when my research team needed to run overnight experiments. How could a person like that be behind all of this? I shook my head slightly. It can't be. Julian didn't jump to conclusions. He flipped the card over and said calmly, "This card only proves someone dropped it here. It's not enough to conclude that David is the one who was watching you." I looked at him, forcing myself to calm down. He was right. If the opponent was smart enough to stage a crime scene, fake camera footage, and alter system logs, then deliberately leaving an ID card to mislead us was entirely possible. My mother, still standing beside me, didn't understand what was happening. She just looked at me with worry and asked softly, "Evelyn, what's going on?" I took her hand. "Mom, I'm just having a little trouble at work, but don't worry, everything will be sorted out soon." She looked deep into my eyes for a long moment, then sighed. "You've never been a good liar, honey." I looked down. She gently stroked my hair, just like when I was a child. "If something is wrong, talk to me. I might not be able to help much, but don't carry it all by yourself." Her words brought a lump to my throat. It had been so long since I'd felt that sense of being protected. Julian spoke up. "Ma'am, I've arranged for some people to be nearby. For the next few days, if any strangers come asking questions, or if you notice anything unusual, please call me immediately." He handed my mother his business card. My mom looked at him and smiled gently. "Thank you, son. You must care for her a great deal to worry about her so much." My mother's natural comment made both Julian and me freeze. My cheeks flushed, while Julian just gave a slight smile, neither confirming nor denying it. On the way back to the city, the atmosphere in the car was quieter than usual. I watched the golden streetlights streak past the window and asked, "Do you think it's David?" He kept his eyes on the road. "I don't trust anyone until I have enough proof. Including you." He glanced at me for a second. "At first, I trusted you because of the person you are. Now, I trust you because the evidence is proving you were framed." I smiled faintly. For the first time since this all began, I didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, I received a call from the institute. The director asked me to come in, saying there were new developments. When I walked into the conference room, besides the board members, David Chen was also there. His face was gaunt, his eyes bloodshot as if he hadn't slept in days. The moment he saw me, he stood up. "Ava, I'm so sorry." I was taken aback. "Sorry for what?" David lowered his head. "My system administrator account was compromised 3 weeks ago." The entire room fell silent. The head of legal immediately asked, "Why are you only reporting this now?" David clenched his fists. "Because I didn't know. It wasn't until this morning, when I re-examined the entire server log, that I discovered a hidden account was created using my admin privileges." I watched him closely. His eyes didn't look like those of a man who was lying. He continued, "If the intruder had admin rights, they could have easily modified the access logs and faked Evelyn's account activity." I suddenly remembered Julian's analysis. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together. Just then, the conference room door opened. Julian and Isabel Vance walked in. Isabel placed a blue file on the table. "I've just received the results of an independent investigation from our corporation's cybersecurity experts." All eyes turned to her. Isabel opened the file and pulled out a server connection diagram. The intruder did not carry out the breach from outside the network. The director frowned. "What do you mean?" Isabel calmly replied, "All of the copied data was transferred through a device physically plugged directly into the Institute's internal network. This device was active for only 4 minutes. I instinctively asked, "Can you pinpoint its location?" Isabel nodded and pointed to the diagram. "The old equipment storage room." I was stunned. That was a room few people ever entered, located at the end of the basement corridor. In my 3 years at the Institute, I had only been down there once to find an old microscope. Julian looked at the director. "I suggest we unseal that room immediately." Less than 20 minutes later, we were all in the basement. The door to the storage room was opened, releasing a musty smell. Old equipment was piled high on metal shelves. The tech team began to inspect every corner of the room. After nearly half an hour, a technician suddenly called out, "Found it!" From behind a metal cabinet, he pulled out a small broadcasting device, no bigger than the palm of a hand, still connected to a backup power source. Isabel took one look at it and confirmed, "This is the data relay device." A collective sigh of relief filled the room, as if we had just made the first breakthrough. But as the tech team prepared to disconnect the device for forensic analysis, a faint click sound came from within it. Julian's expression changed. He yelled, "Back up! Everyone get away from the device." Before anyone could react, a small screen on the device lit up, displaying a red countdown, 029, 028, 027. The room was plunged into a suffocating, tense silence. No one knew if, when the countdown ended, we would be met with an explosion, or if the most crucial piece of evidence in the case would be permanently erased. The small screen on the device glowed in the dim storage room. The red numbers flashed relentlessly, each one a countdown in sync with the heartbeats of everyone present. I stood less than 10 feet away, feeling the cold sweat on my palms as my mind raced, forcing itself to stay calm. I knew that a device this sophisticated wasn't just a simple storage drive. It was likely the final link in a plan to erase every trace of the person behind the Project Evergreen data theft. Julian immediately raised his hand, stopping anyone from getting closer. His voice was firm. "Nobody touch it. Everyone, back away." A few technicians instinctively moved to unplug it, but he shouted, "Don't touch it!" His command silenced the room. Isabel quickly pulled the director back a few steps and got on her phone to call the corporation's cybersecurity team. The clock kept ticking down. 25, 24, 23. I stared at the device, a thought flashing through my mind. "Julian," I said quickly. He turned to me. "I don't think it's a bomb timer." "What do you mean?" I pointed to the series of indicator lights next to the screen. "If it were an explosive, they wouldn't need to install a network port and a high-capacity SSD like this." Isabel leaned in to look from a safe distance and nodded. "Eva's right. This looks more like a data self-destruct mechanism." Julian's jaw tightened. "Is there any way to stop it?" I studied the device for another few seconds and shook my head. "If we cut the power, it will likely trigger the wipe sequence immediately." The tension mounted. 18, 17, 16. I suddenly remembered a document I had read while researching standalone storage systems. Some devices are programmed to wipe their data only if they lose connection to a control server or when a countdown completes. But if the signal could be isolated at the right moment, the process might be stalled. I turned to David. "Is there a signal jammer in this building?" David understood immediately. "Yes. In the maintenance room on the first floor." "Get it, now." He didn't hesitate, sprinting out of the room. The clock was at 13 seconds. 12, 11. Each tick made my heart pound harder. Julian stood right beside me, his voice low. "And if he doesn't make it in time?" I pressed my lips together, then all the evidence is gone. 9, 8. Just then, David rushed back in, carrying a gray metal box. "I've got it!" I quickly pointed. "Put it about 6 feet from the device and turn it to maximum power." David did as he was told. A low humming sound filled the air just as the clock hit 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. The red screen flickered violently and then went black. The room fell silent. There was no explosion, no smoke, no fire, just the sound of everyone's ragged breathing. After a few seconds, a technician carefully connected the device to a specialized analysis machine. He stared at his monitor and then almost shouted in amazement. "The data is still here." The room let out a collective sigh of relief. Isabel immediately ordered a full backup of the drive onto an independent device. I stood by, watching the slow progress bar, a flicker of hope rising in me for the first time in days. Over 20 minutes later, the backup was complete. The security expert opened the first folder. Hundreds of files appeared. Not just the Project Evergreen data, but also numerous contracts, camera images, access logs, and password-protected folders. A technician murmured, "Looks like this person was using this device as a proxy server." Isabel opened the first file. It was a copy of the entire system log before it had been altered. I quickly scanned it and pointed to a line. There it is. The original log shows my account never logged in at 2:17. Instead, it was a hidden admin account named SYS Patch 9. David let out a sharp breath. Someone did create a ghost account. The institute director turned to me, his face filled with remorse. "Evelyn." I just shook my head slightly. This wasn't the time for apologies. Julian gave a faint smile. He knew what I was thinking. We still didn't know who was behind this. Just then, a technician opened another folder labeled Surveillance. Inside were hundreds of photos. My blood ran cold as I looked at them. Photos of me going to work, of me buying coffee, of me visiting my mother. There was even a photo of me and Chloe talking at a restaurant nearly 2 months ago. All of them were taken from a great distance with a professional telephoto lens. And it wasn't just me. The folder also contained photos of Julian, Isabel, David, and even the institute director. This person hadn't just been watching me. They had been watching everyone connected to Project Evergreen. The brief sense of relief vanished, replaced by a renewed tension. The expert continued, opening another folder. This time, there was only a single video file, less than a minute long. Julian signaled for him to play it. The screen showed a dark room. A man, his back to the camera, was talking on the phone. His voice was too low to make out the words, but as he turned his head to pick up a glass of water, I held my breath. On his left wrist was a long, hook-shaped scar. I had seen that scar somewhere before. It was so familiar, so close to the surface of my memory. As I struggled to place it, Julian's phone rang. It was Leo, his assistant. Julian listened for a moment, and his expression changed instantly. He what? The voice on the other end was urgent. The man secretly assigned to protect my mother had just spotted a strange car parked in front of her house since early morning. When he ran the license plate, it came back as a vehicle registered to the Cascade Bio-Research Institute. Julian and I looked at each other. This meant the traitor was still inside the institute, and knowing the basement device had been discovered, he had already moved on to his next target. The news from Leo sent a chill through the room. If the car outside my mother's house truly belonged to the institute, it confirmed our worst fears. The person behind the data theft not only had intimate knowledge of the technical systems, but also had access to institute assets. They were calm enough to continue surveillance on my family even after their data hub was discovered. This proved they had no intention of running. Instead, they were trying to pressure us into dropping the investigation. Julian hung up, his eyes colder than I had ever seen them. He turned to Isabel and spoke concisely. Run a check on the entire vehicle usage history for the Institute for the last 3 months. Cross-reference it with gate security cameras and the key checkout logs. I want to know who used that car last. Isabel nodded and immediately made a call, coordinating with her legal team and the Institute's administration. I stood beside them, the image of my mother being secretly photographed replaying in my mind. A sense of dread, like an invisible hand, squeezed my chest, making it hard to breathe. Julian looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "I'm taking you to your mother's." I shook my head. No. If we react to his moves, we'll just be led in circles. He wants me to be scared. He didn't reply immediately, studying my face. What are you planning to do? I took a deep breath. I want to know what he's really looking for. The notebooks are gone, the data has been stolen, but he's still watching my mother and me. That means he hasn't gotten what he truly wants yet. David, standing nearby, spoke up. Eva's right. If all he needed was the data, he would have vanished long ago. The room fell into silence. Just then, one of the cybersecurity experts called out, "Everyone, over here." We immediately gathered around his computer screen. He had just managed to decrypt a deeply encrypted folder from the relay device. It wasn't research data or contracts, but a highly detailed personal surveillance file. On the screen were dozens of names and portraits, including mine, Julian's, Isabel's, David's, the director's, and several people I didn't recognize. Each person had a dedicated profile detailing their daily routines, work hours, close relationships, home addresses, license plate numbers, and even the coffee shops they frequented on weekends. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't ordinary surveillance. This was a long-term, meticulously planned operation. Isabel scrolled to the bottom of my file and suddenly stopped. There was a note highlighted in red. Subject is unaware of the 2008 secret. I froze. 2008. Julian turned to me. Did anything happen that year? I tried to remember. In 2008, I was only 10 years old. My family was still living on the outskirts of Portland, and my father was still alive. I shook my head. I don't remember anything special. But as soon as the words left my mouth, a hazy image flashed in my mind. A rainy night. The wail of an ambulance siren. My mother holding me tightly, repeating over and over, "Don't look, Eva. Don't turn around." The memory was fleeting, gone in a second, but it was enough to make my heart pound. Julian noticed the change in my expression. "You remembered something?" I answered slowly. "I just remember there was an accident that year." "Whose accident?" I shook my head. "I don't know. My parents moved us to a new house after that." He looked at me, his gaze intense. Maybe it wasn't a coincidence. Just then, the institute director's phone rang repeatedly. He answered, and after a few words, his face went pale. "What?" We all looked at him. He lowered the phone and spoke in a heavy voice. "The old personnel records archive just caught fire." I was startled. "A fire?" "Yes. Almost all the records from 2000 to 2010 have been destroyed. No one spoke, but we all understood the implication. If those files contained any information related to 2008, the chance of verifying it was now almost zero. Julian immediately looked at Isabel. Check the digital backup system. Isabel typed quickly on her laptop, then shook her head slightly. Nothing. Records from that era were only kept in hard copy. I clenched my fists. Every trace was being systematically erased. At that moment, Leo rushed in, his face tense. "Mr. Thorne, we've identified the last person who checked out the vehicle seen near Mrs. Reed's house." The entire room turned to him. Leo held up a tablet and handed it to Julian. I stepped closer to look. On the screen was the vehicle checkout log with a clear signature. It wasn't David. It wasn't the director. It was a name that made me freeze. Dr. Samuel Miller. I frowned, trying to place the name. Julian turned to me. "You know him." I nodded slightly, my throat suddenly dry. "Who is he?" I took a deep breath and answered, each word heavy. He was my first department head. The one who resigned abruptly 2 years ago, saying he was moving abroad. As I finished speaking, David's phone rang. He looked at the screen, and his face turned ashen. "It's security." He swallowed hard. "They just discovered Dr. Miller's old office was unlocked 10 minutes ago. When they got there, no one was inside, but a laptop was left on." Julian and I looked at each other. We both had the same powerful intuition. Behind that office door lay the answer to the secret that someone had been willing to kill to protect. I barely felt my own footsteps as I ran alongside Julian, Isabel, David, and 2 security guards down the 3rd-floor corridor of the Research Institute. My mind was consumed by a single thought. If the person who had just broken into Dr. Samuel Miller's old office was trying to erase the final traces of evidence, then every passing second could mean another crucial piece of the puzzle disappearing forever. Julian maintained his usual calm demeanor, but I noticed his hand was clenched tightly around his phone, the veins standing out, something that only happened when he felt a situation was spiraling beyond his control. The door to Dr. Miller's former office was slightly ajar. There were no signs of forced entry, meaning the person had used a valid key or electronic access. Isabel held up a hand, stopping everyone from entering, and motioned for the tech team to go first. 2 technicians quickly put on gloves and swept the area around the doorknob with a UV light before gently pushing the door open. A thin layer of dust covered everything inside. The office had been vacant for nearly 2 years, but in the middle of the old desk sat an open laptop. The screen was still on, the cooling fan humming softly, indicating that its user had left only moments before. Standing at the doorway, I felt as if someone had deliberately left it there for us to find. David stepped closer, looked at the screen, and frowned. "It's not locked." I was surprised. "You mean it's still logged in?" Julian spoke immediately. "Don't touch the keyboard. Connect the backup drive first." A security expert quickly attached a specialized data cloning device. The entire hard drive was copied to an independent unit before anyone touched a thing. After nearly 10 minutes, he nodded. "It's done." David gently moved the mouse. On the screen, only one folder was open. Its name was short. A 2008. The room fell strangely silent. I stared at the name, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was the second time in one day that the year 2008 had appeared before me. David opened the folder. Inside were only 3 files: an audio file, a video clip, and a PDF document titled Internal Memo. Isabel looked at Julian. "Which one first?" He thought for a moment, then said, "The PDF." The moment the document opened, everyone froze. It was the minutes of a research group meeting from 18 years ago, when the institute went by a different name. The attendance list had only 6 names. I didn't recognize most of them, but the last line made my breath catch in my throat. Technical Supervisor, Dr. Michael Reed. I stood motionless. Michael Reed was my father's name. The hand I had placed on the edge of the desk began to tremble. Julian turned to me. "Is that?" I nodded numbly. "That's my father." The air in the room grew heavy. I continued reading. The memo detailed a research project on a cold-resistant crop strain, the predecessor to today's Project Evergreen. The project had been suspended after a serious incident that required all data to be sealed. But the strange thing was, the end of the document had been redacted, with only a few faded words remaining. Lead party responsible deceased. I looked up sharply. My father didn't die that year, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He passed away 3 years later. Isabel immediately took a picture of the screen. Someone edited this document. Just then, David opened the audio file. A few seconds of static gave way to the voice of a middle-aged man. We can't publish these findings. If this gets out, the entire project will be shut down. Another voice responded quickly. But Reed won't agree. I held my breath. The first voice continued. If he still has the original logs, we're all finished. The recording ended abruptly with a loud crash. A chill went down my spine. Julian looked at me with concern but said nothing. He knew that at this moment, no words of comfort would mean anything. David moved on to the final video file. The image was grainy, filmed with an old camera. It showed the parking lot behind the Research Institute at night. A man clutching a briefcase was running, with 2 other figures chasing him. The quality was too poor to make out any faces, but as the man turned sideways for a split second to open his car door, I froze. The watch on his wrist was identical to the one my father wore in old family photos. I took a step back involuntarily. No, the video continued. Before the man could get into his car, another car sped toward him. The screen shook violently and then went black. There was no image of a collision, no screams, just the prolonged screech of tires before the film ended. The room was plunged into silence. I suddenly remembered that vague memory. The wail of an ambulance. No Namandarins. My mother holding me. Not letting me look back. Maybe it wasn't a random accident after all. Just then, Leo rushed in, breathless, holding a yellowed envelope. Mr. Thorne. The security guard at the main gate just found this tucked under the office door. Isabel carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single old key and a typewritten note. I read the words, and my heart felt like it had stopped. If you want to know the truth about Michael Reed, come to Greenhouse #7 at the old agricultural station tomorrow at 9 p.m. Alone. If you bring the police or Julian Thorne, you will never know who killed your father. Everyone in the room turned to look at me. I crumpled the note in my hand. For the first time since this ordeal began, the person in the shadows was no longer targeting Project Evergreen or the research data. They were pulling me directly into a secret that had been buried for nearly 2 decades. The note in my hand trembled with my ragged breathing. The neatly typed words on the plain white paper seemed emotionless, yet they carried enough weight to shatter everything I had believed for the past 20 years. Ever since my father's death, my mother had only ever told me it was a tragic car accident, that he had been taken too suddenly, and that for our own peace, we shouldn't dig any deeper. I was 13 then, old enough to feel the pain, but not mature enough to question it. I never imagined that one day I would have to confront the possibility that his death wasn't an accident but the result of a conspiracy that had been covered up for nearly 2 decades. As I stared at the paper, Julian gently took it from my hand. He read it once more, then placed it on the desk. His voice was grim. It's a trap. I looked up at him. I know. And the person who sent it is counting on you to go. I managed a faint, weary smile. Because they're using my father. Isabel stood with her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on the note. There are 2 possibilities. Either this person truly holds a piece of the truth we don't have, or they're trying to exploit Evelyn's emotional state to isolate her from us. David nodded slowly. Either way, we can't let her go alone. I remained silent. My mind was no longer on the Project Evergreen investigation, the system logs, or the doctored camera footage. All I could see was the image of the man in the old video, clutching a briefcase, running through the parking lot before disappearing into darkness. My intuition told me that briefcase held something far more important than the current research data, something that had silenced people for 18 years and driven someone to continue erasing traces to this day. Julian pulled a chair to face me, his eyes calm but resolute. Evelyn, I'm not letting you go there alone. I shook my head slightly. If I don't follow the instructions, he'll disappear. If you go alone, you might be the one who disappears. His words hung in the silent room. I knew he wasn't exaggerating. The person behind this had watched me for months, broken into my home, threatened my mother, planted a data-wiping device, and consistently stayed 1 step ahead of us. This wasn't an impulsive amateur. This was someone patient, calculating, and skilled at psychological manipulation. Isabel suddenly spoke up. I have an idea. We all looked at her. We let Evelyn show up as requested, but our person will never know we're prepared. Julian immediately asked, You mean a covert setup? Isabel nodded. No police, no corporate vehicles, no uniformed security. We use long-range surveillance equipment, and only people we trust completely. I looked at her, then back at Julian. He was silent for a long time before letting out a slow breath. I don't like this plan, I said quietly. But it might be our only chance. He looked directly into my eyes. I'll only agree on one condition. What is it? The second you see any sign of trouble, you get out of there. Immediately, regardless of whether you get the truth or not. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure I could turn my back if that person truly knew what had happened to my father. Just then, my phone vibrated. A text from a blocked number. It was a single, short sentence. Don't ask your mother. She'll lie to you, just like she has for the past 18 years. A chill ran through me. He didn't just know about me. He knew the intricacies of my relationship with my mother. Julian read the message over my shoulder and immediately said to Leo, Double the protection on Mrs. Reed. Leo nodded and left at once. That evening, I went home earlier than usual. I didn't tell my mother about the letter, or mention Samuel Miller or the video. But when I walked into the living room, I found her sitting in front of the old wooden cabinet, holding a faded photograph. When she saw me, she quickly put the photo away and forced a smile. You're home early today. I sat down next to her. Mom, Dad died in an accident, right? Her hand flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but I saw it. She didn't answer right away, turning to look out at the garden where the hydrangeas swayed in the evening breeze. After a long silence, she asked, Why are you asking about this now? I looked her straight in the eye. Please, just answer me. She closed her eyes and said slowly, Yes. I waited a few seconds. Are you sure? This time, she didn't answer at all. Her silence hurt more than any words could. I remembered the text message, and for the first time in my life, a terrifying thought crossed my mind. Maybe my mother wasn't lying to deceive me, but to protect me from a truth too dangerous for a child to know. I stood up to leave, but she suddenly called out, Evelyn. I turned. She slowly opened the drawer, took out the photograph she had hidden, and placed it in my hand. It was a picture of my father standing in front of an experimental greenhouse with 4 other people. One corner of the photo was torn, as if someone had deliberately ripped away the face of the person standing on the far left. I looked closer and saw a line of faded handwriting on the back. If you ever see this photo, don't trust anyone who was in the frame. I looked up sharply, but my mother had already turned away, silent tears streaming down her face. And I stood there, clutching the photograph, understanding that from this moment on, our investigation was no longer just about finding the thief behind the Project Evergreen data leak. We were stepping into an old, dark secret, where every person who had ever stood beside my father could be a witness, an accomplice, or even the killer. I held the old photograph for a long time without saying another word. The more I looked at it, the more I realized it wasn't just a random souvenir photo. It was carefully staged. My father stood in the center, with a row of greenhouses numbered 1 through 7 behind him. The 4 other people were all wearing the same style of lab coat from the institute. What was strange was that even though the left corner was torn, the remaining space showed that the missing person had stood very close to my father, so close their shoulders were almost touching. Their relationship was clearly more than just professional. I looked up at my mother, wanting to ask so many questions, but seeing the exhaustion in her eyes, the deep lines etched on the face of the woman who had raised me alone, I swallowed them all. I understood that if she had kept this silent for nearly 20 years, it was either because she couldn't speak or she didn't dare to. Both possibilities pointed to a secret far larger than what Julian and I were currently seeing. My mother gently took my hand, her voice a near whisper, as if she feared being overheard. Evelyn. Some things are better learned late than too soon. I looked her straight in the eye, but I'm already involved. She closed her eyes. I know. Why did you never tell me about this photo? She was silent for a long moment before answering slowly. Because I made a promise to your father. Why did you have to promise? She just shook her head. I can't say. In that moment, I knew that no matter how many times I asked, She wouldn't say more. Her expression wasn't one of hesitation, but of the resolve of someone who would carry that secret to her grave if necessary. I left the house as dusk was falling. As I stepped out the gate, I saw Julian's car parked a short distance away. He was still in the driver's seat, the window half down. He had clearly been waiting for a while but hadn't rushed me, just quietly watching the small house behind me, as if to ensure my mother was safe. I got into the car. "How long have you been here?" "About 40 minutes. Why didn't you come in?" He gave a small smile. "That was time you needed to have with your mother." The car pulled away from the quiet street. Neither of us spoke for the first few minutes, until I handed him the photograph. Julian examined it closely, then used an image processing app on his phone to zoom in on the background. "Look at this." I leaned closer. In the far right corner, behind Greenhouse #7, an old pickup truck was partially hidden behind a line of trees. The license plate was illegible, but a faint blue triangular logo was still visible on the door. Did Thorne Dynamics ever use a logo like that? He shook his head. "No." "So it's from the Institute?" He shook his head again. "Not them either." I frowned. "How do you know?" He zoomed in further and said slowly, "This logo belonged to a private company that supplied agricultural equipment, but that company was dissolved 15 years ago. I remember it because its founder was one of my father's first business partners." I turned to look at him. "You knew him? If I remember correctly?" He paused, searching his memory. His name was Richard Sterling. The name had barely been spoken when Isabel called. "Julian, I just finished the search." "Go ahead." "Richard Sterling's company wasn't dissolved because of bankruptcy." "Then why?" "Because he went missing." I instinctively gripped my seatbelt tighter. "Missing?" "Yes. The official file just says, 'whereabouts unknown.' But what's significant is that 3 months before he disappeared, his company signed a contract to supply the entire greenhouse system for the precursor project to Evergreen." Julian immediately slowed the car and pulled over. "Isabel, send the entire file to my tablet." "Already sent." After he hung up, his phone buzzed again. This time it was Leo. "Mr. Thorne, I just got the results from the fingerprint analysis of Dr. Miller's old office." "What did you find?" "Only 3 sets of prints." "Whose?" "A janitor's, from months ago, David Chen's, and..." Leo hesitated for a second, "and Dr. Michael Reed's." I thought I had misheard. "That's impossible." Leo sounded just as baffled. "I had them run it twice. The results are the same." I turned to Julian. "My father has been gone for years." He said gravely, "Prints would only last if they were preserved from before." I shook my head. "No, that office was renovated after Dr. Miller left. All the furniture is new." Neither of us said another word. The same terrifying question formed in both our minds. If the fingerprint wasn't old, there was only one other possibility. Someone who had recently touched that desk had the exact same fingerprints as my father. The car started moving again, the atmosphere heavy. My mind raced, replaying everything I knew about my family, the seemingly ordinary stories my mother had told me. Then a memory surfaced, clearer than ever before. It was my father, holding me in front of a large greenhouse. He smiled and said something I didn't understand at the time. "If I'm not here one day, remember this. The plants never lie. Only people do." That memory made my eyes fly open. The greenhouse. Greenhouse #7 wasn't just the meeting place for tomorrow night. It might have been the place where my father had tried to leave something for me nearly 20 years ago. Just then, my phone vibrated. It wasn't a blocked number, but a video sent from an account named SM. I opened it. The footage was shaky, as if filmed in a hurry. A man in a dark coat stood in the middle of Greenhouse #7, holding an old leather briefcase, the same one from the 2008 video. He slowly looked up at the camera and pulled down his mask. The blood in my veins turned to ice. The face belonged to Dr. Samuel Miller, the man we all believed had left the country 2 years ago. He stared into the lens and spoke a single sentence, his voice steady. "Eva, your father never betrayed anyone. But if you're not on time tomorrow night, there will be no one left to prove it." I watched the 30-second video over and over, memorizing every slight movement on Dr. Samuel Miller's face. My intuition told me this was not a man who wasted words, nor one who would willingly appear on camera without a clear purpose. What struck me most wasn't his final sentence, but his weary eyes and the way he kept glancing to the right of the frame, as if someone else, just out of shot, was monitoring his every word. I immediately replayed the video, slowing the playback speed to its lowest setting. Beside me, Julian watched with a rare, intense focus. He suddenly pointed to the bottom corner of the screen. "Stop." I hit pause. Reflected for less than half a second on the glass of the greenhouse was the tiny, dark silhouette of another person. They were holding a long object. It could have been a walkie-talkie or a tranquilizer gun. Julian let out a soft breath. "He's not alone." I nodded. "And likely not there willingly." Isabel, who had just arrived, watched the video and then opened her tablet, immediately analyzing the file's metadata. Less than 5 minutes later, she looked up. The video wasn't filmed live. I was surprised. "What do you mean?" "It was recorded at least 12 hours ago, then sent. The sender is in complete control of when we receive it." Julian's voice was grim. "He's always one step ahead of us." I clenched my phone. "No. This time he wants us to walk the path he's laid out." The three of us fell silent. Just then, Leo hurried over, holding a freshly printed file. "Mr. Thorne, I've run a full background check on Samuel Miller." Julian took it and began reading. The file showed that after resigning 2 years ago, Dr. Miller had never left the country. Instead, his ID was used only once during that entire period, to rent a storage unit in an old agricultural district south of Portland. After that, he vanished without a trace. I looked at the address and murmured, "The old agricultural district." Julian looked at me. "What about it?" "I remember from Dad's photo. Greenhouse #7 is in that same area." Isabel immediately pulled up a satellite map. The entire old research area had been abandoned for nearly 15 years. Most of the greenhouses were dilapidated, though a few sections still had power where they were being leased as temporary warehouses. What was strange was that Greenhouse #7 was completely isolated from the others. Behind it, a dirt road led into a pine forest and ended at a cliff face. Julian studied the map for a long time. "If you wanted an escape route," he said quietly, "that's the perfect location." I understood. With a vehicle waiting in the forest, the person behind this could disappear in minutes. He looked at me. "I'll let you go in first." Before I could speak, he continued, "But I am not letting you walk in there without a contingency plan." We stayed up nearly all night creating that plan. No police, as the note demanded. No uniformed security. Instead, Leo arranged for 4 former wilderness rescue experts to pose as groundskeepers in the surrounding area. Isabel would manage all communications through a microtransmitter hidden in my earring. And Julian insisted on being the on-site commander, close enough to intervene but far enough to remain undetected. Before we parted ways to prepare, he called me out onto the balcony of the hotel where we were staying. The cool Portland night air carried the familiar scent of damp pine. He stood by the railing for a long time before speaking. "There's one more thing I haven't told you." I turned to him. "What is it?" He took an old, yellowed envelope from his jacket. "This is something my father left for me before he passed away." I was a little surprised. "Your father?" He nodded. "He invested in a high-tech agricultural project nearly 20 years ago." My heart sank. Was it connected to my father? I didn't know at first, but after I saw the logo of Richard Sterling's company in the photo, I remembered. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a short note written in a strong, masculine hand. "If you ever meet Michael Reed, tell him I believed him." I read the words over and over, a lump forming in my throat. Julian gave a sad smile. Unfortunately, I never got the chance to deliver the message. I looked at him. Maybe my father never knew. He nodded silently. The silence between us was long but comfortable. We both knew that the meeting tomorrow night would decide not only the fate of Project Evergreen, but would also be the answer to a debt that had gone unpaid for nearly 2 decades. The next morning, as I was getting ready to leave the hotel, my phone buzzed with a new text from the blocked number. There were no words, only a photo. It was a surveillance shot taken from a distance, of me and Julian standing on the balcony less than 5 minutes earlier. Below the image was a single line of text that sent a chill down my spine. "Don't bring the man you love, or he'll be the first to die." Before I could show the phone to Julian, he had already seen the screen. He didn't seem surprised. He simply locked my phone and looked me straight in the eye, his gaze unnervingly calm. "Evelyn," I answered quietly. "Yes." He gave a very faint smile. "Then this time, we'll make him believe I'm really not coming with you." As he spoke, from a hidden spot far across from the hotel, a camera lens focused on us. The person holding the camera behind a pine tree smirked and sent a text message to an unsaved number. It contained only 3 words. The fish took the bait. The dashboard clock ticked over to 8:32 p.m. as I took a final deep breath and stepped out of the car. I was at the entrance to the old agricultural station, a place that, 20 years ago, had been the most advanced research center in the region. Now it was just a ruin of moss-covered greenhouses, their rusted steel frames slumped beneath a thick blanket of fog. The cracked concrete paths were nearly swallowed by weeds. The desolate scene was a perfect mirror of the truth that had been buried for so long. The more you try to hide something, the more it decays from within, until a single touch could make it all collapse. Julian had parked nearly 500 yards away, just as we planned. He didn't get out, just watched me through the half-open window, his expression calm but unable to hide his concern. I gave a slight nod, a silent promise to stay composed and not act recklessly. We both knew that from this moment on, my every move was likely under surveillance. I closed the car door and started walking alone toward Greenhouse #7. Isabel's voice came through the micro earpiece, crisp and clear. "Signal is stable," I murmured in reply. "Understood." Leo's voice followed. "All 4 observation posts are in position. No unusual movement detected." I kept walking, my breathing even, projecting the image of someone completely alone. But I knew that far behind me, Julian was tracking my every step with a thermal imaging camera. The fog grew thicker, my flashlight beam cutting only a few feet ahead. The old glass panes of the greenhouses reflected the light, creating a dozen distorted, shadowy figures that made me feel as if I were being watched from all directions. I stopped in front of the rusted iron door of Greenhouse #7. The time was exactly 8:59 p.m. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, a long, drawn-out creak echoing in the silence. It was darker inside than I expected. Most of the roof panels were coated in grime, allowing only a few weak beams of moonlight to filter down onto the cracked tile floor. In the center of the space sat a single old wooden table. On it was a weathered brown leather briefcase, the leather so worn it was peeling. It was the same briefcase from the 2008 video. My heart pounded. I approached it slowly. "I'm here." My voice echoed in the empty space and was quickly swallowed by the fog. No one answered. I scanned the area. There was no one in sight. Isabel's voice came through my earpiece. "Evelyn, thermal is clear. There's no one in the greenhouse with you." I frowned. That made no sense. The sender wouldn't just leave the briefcase and disappear. Just then, a faint noise came from behind me. I spun around, but all I saw was a secondary door swaying gently in the breeze. As I started to walk toward it, Julian's voice, for the first time sharp and urgent, cut through the earpiece. "Don't open the briefcase." I froze. "What did you find?" He replied quickly. "There's someone there." At the same time, Leo reported, new heat signal just appeared behind the west wall. Before I could react, a slow, deliberate clap echoed from the dark corner behind a set of old steel frames. A figure stepped out of the shadows. It wasn't Samuel Miller. This man was and on his left wrist was the hook-shaped scar I had seen in the video. It was him. He gave a faint smile. "So, Michael Reed's daughter finally arrives." I kept my distance, my voice steady. "Who are you?" He didn't answer, instead looking around the greenhouse wistfully. This place was much more beautiful 20 years ago. "I'll ask again," I repeated. "Who are you?" The man chuckled. "Someone your father betrayed." Hearing that, I immediately shook my head. "You're lying." The smile vanished from his face. "The daughter is just like the father." I stared him down. "If my father was the traitor, why did you spend nearly 20 years erasing every piece of evidence?" His eyes flickered just for a second, but it was enough. I knew I had hit a nerve. Just then, another voice called out from behind a tattered old curtain. "Don't believe a word he says." I turned, startled, as a hidden door at the far end of the greenhouse swung open. Dr. Samuel Miller emerged, his face gaunt. his hands bound with zip ties that he had partially cut through. A dried streak of blood was on his forehead. The man with the scar immediately pulled out a handgun and aimed it at Dr. Miller. "Shut up." Dr. Miller didn't back down. He looked directly at me. "Evelyn, the briefcase isn't the most important thing." I instinctively glanced down at the briefcase. Dr. Miller shouted, "Don't open it." Almost simultaneously, the man with the scar fired. A sharp crack echoed through the greenhouse. Before I could process what happened, I saw Dr. Miller stagger back, clutching his bleeding left shoulder. But before he fell, he used his last bit of strength to kick the briefcase toward me, yelling in pain, "What they want isn't in the case, it's in the false bottom." At that exact moment, all the old lights in the greenhouse flickered on, as if someone had activated a backup generator. And in my ear, Julian's urgent voice commanded, "Evelyn, get down!" I dove to the side on instinct. The glass panels on the roof shattered, raining down shards as multiple gunshots rang out from outside. This was never a three-person meeting. It was an ambush, a trap set to eliminate anyone who still knew the truth about that fateful night nearly 20 years ago. The moment I hit the cold concrete floor, a hailstorm of sharp glass shards rained down from the ceiling. The sound of shattering glass and ricocheting bullets echoed off the steel frames, creating a chaotic symphony of destruction. But what stunned me most wasn't the ambush itself, but the reaction of the man with the hook-shaped scar. Instead of using the chaos to escape, he lunged for the leather briefcase, as if it held something more valuable than his own life. "Don't let him get the case." Dr. Miller's voice was hoarse with pain. He gritted his teeth, clutched his bleeding shoulder with his good arm, and threw himself at the man with the scar. The impact sent both men tumbling to the ground. The handgun skidded away across the floor. Without a second thought, I scrambled toward the briefcase. My instinct screamed that if it fell into the wrong hands, everything my father had died to protect would be lost forever. Isabel's urgent voice crackled in my ear. "Evelyn, the North team has spotted 3 armed hostiles moving in." Leo reported immediately after. South team intercepted 2. But we still have at least 4 unidentified targets. Julian didn't respond to either of them. I could only hear the sound of his rapid footsteps approaching, a clear sign that he had abandoned his observation post. I grabbed the briefcase, my mind racing back to Dr. Miller's words. The false bottom. My hands shaking, I unlatched the 2 clasps. Inside, there were only a few stacks of yellowed documents and a nearly empty notebook. It looked like nothing special. But when I turned the briefcase over, I noticed the leather on the bottom was thicker than the rest. There was a tiny, almost invisible seam along the inner edge. I used the old key from the envelope to pry it open. With a soft click, a second compartment sprang open. Inside wasn't money or a hard drive, but a moisture-proof metal tube sealed with beeswax, a preservation method my father had often used for plant specimens during fieldwork. The moment I had the tube in my hand, the man with the scar let out a desperate roar. "Give that to me!" He shoved Dr. Miller aside and lunged at me. But in that same instant, a figure burst through the side entrance of the greenhouse. Julian slammed his shoulder into the man, sending them both crashing to the broken floor. I caught a glimpse of a long tear on Julian's sleeve before I clutched the metal tube tighter. The scarred man, though older, was incredibly fast. As he fell, he drew a folding knife from his sleeve. The blade flashed as it arced toward Julian. Before I could scream, Leo burst through the main entrance, using a rescue baton to strike the man's arm, sending the knife flying. Just then, the rest of the support team swarmed in, subduing the other intruders after a brief but fierce struggle. The gunfire ceased as quickly as it had begun. The greenhouse was filled only with the ragged breathing of those who had just stared death in the face. Dr. Miller leaned against a steel post, his face pale from blood loss, but his eyes were fixed on me. "Open it." I looked at Julian. He gave a slight nod. I carefully broke the wax seal on the metal tube and slowly slid out a roll of microfilm and a sealed envelope. On the front of the envelope, in a familiar script that made my eyes burn, were the words, "To my daughter, Evelyn." My hands trembled uncontrollably. I recognized that handwriting immediately. It was my father's. Taking a deep breath, I opened the letter. The words appeared before me, bridging the years and bringing back the man I had lost so long ago. "My dearest Evelyn, If you are reading this, it means I was unable to explain things to you myself. The first thing I want you to know is that I never betrayed my colleagues, I never sold my research, and I never traded my conscience for money or fame. What I was protecting was not just a scientific breakthrough, but the livelihood of thousands of farmers if this crop strain was misused. Someone wanted to alter the test results to rush an unsafe product to market. I refused to sign off, so they decided to erase all traces and make me the one to blame. If you are alive to read this, please forgive me for making your mother endure so much. Do not seek revenge. Let the truth speak for itself through the evidence. Tears streamed down my face, staining the pages. I looked up at Dr. Miller. He nodded slowly. Michael gave me the briefcase the night before the accident. I was going to release everything, but they found out. I've been in hiding for years, because if I surfaced, the evidence would have disappeared with me. The man with the scar, now restrained, laughed with bitter venom. You think a letter means you've won? Isabel stepped forward calmly, holding the microfilm, which an expert had already secured. No, she said, looking directly at him. The letter isn't what will decide this. She held up the film. This is the original research data, the minutes of every meeting, the list of everyone who altered the numbers, and all the original signatures before they were forged. It's more than enough for a forensic document analysis to cross-reference with every falsified record. The color drained from the man's face. He stared at the microfilm as if he had just lost his last hope. Julian stood up, brushing the dust from his suit. For 20 years, he said slowly, you weren't protecting a secret. You were just buying time to hide a crime. The man bowed his head, a hollow laugh escaping his lips. I thought it was all over. No, I said, stepping in front of him, my father's letter still in my hand. Today is just the beginning. A few months later, the full investigation was made public. The data from the microfilm, combined with the evidence recovered from the relay device, completely exonerated my father. It also proved that I had been framed in the Project Evergreen data theft. The Institute officially reinstated me and issued a public apology to the entire staff. Project Evergreen, after a thorough review, was restarted with stricter transparency standards, carrying forward the unfinished dream of a previous generation of researchers. One early spring morning, my mother and I stood before my father's grave on a hill overlooking a sun-drenched valley. I placed the carefully preserved letter next to a bouquet of white daisies and smiled softly in the cool breeze. I could finally say the words I had waited nearly 20 years to say, Dad, I always believed you. It's just that today, the rest of the world finally knows you were innocent. Behind me, Julian quietly took my hand. He said nothing, but that warm, firm grip was enough. I knew that some journeys don't end because the pain is gone, but because, after everything, the truth has finally found its way into the light. And those who choose to protect what is right will never have to stand alone again. And so, the story of Evelyn Reed, of secrets buried for years, of a family's pain, and the long journey to find the truth, comes to a close. But perhaps what lingers is not just the conspiracies or the tense moments, but the simple lessons in how we treat one another. After all, no matter how tangled a story becomes, what we remember most is the human connection. We can spend years building a career, proving our worth, and chasing grand ambitions. But in the end, what remains in the memory of others is rarely how much money we made, or what title we held, but how we made them feel. A kind word at the right time can save someone from loneliness. Unwavering trust can help someone who has lost hope find faith in themselves again. A small act of kindness can become a guiding light for someone lost in the dark. Evelyn's journey was not an easy one. She was doubted, hurt, and abandoned by those around her. But what was most admirable was not her ability to survive danger, but her refusal to let the wounds turn her heart cold. We all face moments like that. Times when our good intentions are misunderstood, when our efforts go unnoticed, when someone we trusted lets us down. In those moments, the hardest battle is not with others, but with ourselves. Do we hold on to our integrity? Do we continue to live with kindness? Or do we let the negativity change who we are? A truly strong person isn't someone who has never been hurt. A strong person is someone who has felt pain, known disappointment, and had every reason to become callous, but still chooses to live with compassion and integrity. In life, justice can be slow to arrive. Some people wait years for the truth to be acknowledged. Some injustices cannot be explained away overnight. But as the old saying goes, if you live an honest life, you have nothing to fear. Others may not understand you today. Your efforts may not be recognized. But time has a way of revealing all things. A sincere person will eventually find sincere people. A person who lives with honor will earn respect. A person who plants seeds of goodness will one day see them bloom. What moves us most in this story is not just the final revelation of the truth, but the love of family that underpinned it all. Evelyn's mother carried a heavy secret for many years. Some might fault her for not speaking up sooner. But if we put ourselves in her shoes, we understand that a mother's silence is sometimes not meant to hide, but to protect. There is no love more quiet, yet more enduring, than that of a parent. They may not use flowery words or show their emotions openly. They may seem too strict, too worried, or too overbearing. But behind it all is a simple fear, the fear of their child suffering, of their child facing the same hardships they once did. When we are young, we often think our parents don't understand us. But as we grow older, we realize that sometimes they didn't speak not because they didn't know, but because they chose to carry the heavier burden themselves. So if you are lucky enough to still have your parents, please spend more time with them. Don't wait until you're successful to return. Don't wait until you have a lot of money to give back. Because what parents want most is often not a grand gift, but a simple phone call, a family dinner, or the gentle reassurance that you are okay. Just as the friendship between Evelyn and Chloe and the steadfast companionship of Julian Thorne show us, finding someone who is willing to believe in you during your darkest hours is a priceless gift. Not everyone is meant to be in our lives forever, but the ones who stay when we are at our most vulnerable are the ones worth cherishing. Life does not promise us a smooth path. There will be days of exhaustion and moments of doubt. But remember, a person's value is not measured by their absence of failure, but by how they rise after falling. We cannot change the past. We cannot make everyone understand us, but we can always choose how we move forward. Choose kindness over bitterness. Choose forgiveness over resentment. Choose love over indifference. Because in the end, what makes a beautiful life is not the storms we have weathered, but how much warmth we have managed to keep in our hearts after they have passed. Every story is a mirror. Perhaps in today's story, you saw Evelyn. But perhaps you also saw yourself in moments of being misunderstood, of having to be strong when you felt weak, of wishing for just one person to believe in you. And perhaps you saw a loved one, a parent, a friend who sacrificed for you in silence. Life is short. Don't wait until it's too late to recognize what is most important. Love while you can. Say thank you when you have the chance. Cherish the people who are by your side. Because in the end, the most precious thing we carry with us on our journey is not what we owned, but the sincere love we gave away.